The clock on my computer screen blinked 3:17 p.m., another hour, and I could finally escape this spreadsheet. Numbers swam before my eyes. Sales figures, projections, the kind of data that usually held my attention, but today they felt like hieroglyphs. I leaned back in my chair, the faux leather groaning in protest. The air in my cubicle was stale, recycled, the same temperature it had been all morning. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder than usual, a constant low-level drone that vibrated in my skull. I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm, bitter, and tasted faintly of the cardboard cup. I grimaced. I'd made it hours ago, intending to drink it hot, but the day had slipped away from me, each task blurring into the next. I hadn't even noticed it cooling. That pretty much summed up my week. My gaze drifted to the framed photo on my desk. Sarah. Her smile bright and wide, the one that used to make my heart skip a beat. We were on the beach, the sun setting behind us, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt like a lifetime ago. 6 years married, and sometimes it felt like we were living separate lives. Not that anything was wrong exactly. We hadn't been fighting. There were no dramatic arguments, no slamming doors, just a quiet distance. She'd been working longer hours at the firm, stressed about deadlines, client meetings, the endless pressure to climb the corporate ladder. I understood. I did. I'd been there myself, but lately it felt like I understand was the only thing I said. She'd come home late, already exhausted, and we'd fall into a routine of a quick dinner, a few strained conversations about our days, and then bed. Even our weekends felt scheduled, filled with errands and chores, catching up on the life that seemed to slip away during the week. The spontaneity, the laughter, the easy connection, it was still there somewhere, but buried under layers of responsibility and routine. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would get better once her big project was over, that we just needed to make more of an effort. But sometimes, late at night, when she was asleep beside me, her back turned, I'd wonder if I was the only one trying to hold on. Today, she was in New York. A business trip, she'd said. A conference, meetings with clients. She'd packed her suitcase on Sunday morning. The familiar sound of the zipper, a kind of punctuation mark on our weekend. I'd kissed her goodbye at the door, told her to have a good trip, and watched her walk to the car, her silhouette disappearing down the street. I hadn't thought much about it since then. Work had consumed me as usual. The days blurred, the weeks blurred, and sometimes I felt like I was just going through the motions. A cog in the machine, a number on a spreadsheet. I glanced at my inbox, 37 unread emails, most of them probably internal memos, meeting requests, the usual office noise. I sighed. I didn't have the energy to deal with them right now. I decided to call it a day, even though I knew I'd just end up staring at the TV, half listening to some mindless show, waiting for the day to end. My phone buzzed on the desk. I didn't recognize the number, probably a telemarketer. I almost ignored it, let it go to voicemail. But something made me hesitate, a flicker of curiosity. I picked it up. The screen displayed a name, Malik. "Hey, little bro," the voice on the other end said, casual, almost too casual. It was Malik, my brother. We weren't exactly close. We lived different lives, on opposite sides of the country. His world was beaches and sunshine. Mine was spreadsheets and deadlines. Our conversations were usually limited to birthdays and holidays, the obligatory check-ins. A call in the middle of a Tuesday was unusual. "What's up, Malik?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. There was a pause, a brief silence that felt heavier than it should have been. It wasn't like him to hesitate. He was always direct, quick to get to the point. This was different. "Quick question, where's your wife?" The question hung in the air, simple yet loaded with an unspoken weight. I blinked. "She's on a business trip," I replied slowly, carefully. "In New York. She left Sunday." Another pause. This one was longer, stretched out, filled with a silence that screamed louder than any words. Something in his voice had shifted, the usual lightheartedness gone, replaced by something serious, something that made my stomach clench. "You sure about that?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. My hand tightened on the phone. "Why do you ask?" I said, my voice tightening, a knot forming in my throat. I didn't like where this was going. I didn't like the way he was asking. It felt like I was being interrogated. but about something I should have known. He sighed, a long drawn-out exhale that sounded tired, resigned. Because I'm standing in the lobby of the resort right now, and I swear on Mom's good name, your wife is, right in front of me. The room fell silent. My ears started to ring. I thought I'd misheard him, that the bad connection had garbled his words, twisted them into something they weren't. But his voice was clear, too clear. What? I managed to say, the word barely a whisper. She's here, Malik repeated, his voice lower now, softer, but with an edge of disbelief. Barefoot, in a sundress, with a guy who looks like he belongs on a cologne ad, and she just paid for the honeymoon suite. Using your ATM card. I didn't breathe. My hand froze on the mouse, the cursor hovering over a cell in the spreadsheet, but the numbers no longer made any sense. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, deafening silence. The coffee, which had tasted like cardboard a moment ago, now felt like sand in my mouth, dry and gritty, leaving a bitter aftertaste. I stared at the monitor, but the rows and columns of data blurred, meaningless. My ears were filled with a ringing sound, a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. My jaw clenched, the muscles in my face tightening, but somehow I kept my voice steady, trying to maintain some semblance of control. Are you sure it's her? I asked, the words forced out, each one a separate effort. Positive, he replied. I waved at her, she waved back. The silence stretched again, a vast, empty space that separated me from the reality he was describing. I rubbed my temple, trying to push away the pounding headache that had just formed behind my eyes, a throbbing ache that pulsed with each beat of my heart. All right, I said, slowly, carefully, my mind racing, trying to catch up with the impossible. Don't say anything else to her. Don't let her know you told me. You got it, Malik said, his voice flat, professional now. The casual tone was completely gone. What do you want me to do? The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible. Your wife is right in front of me. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be true. Sarah was in New York. I'd seen her off myself. The image of her walking away, her rolling suitcase behind her, flashed through my mind, a stark contrast to the picture Malik was painting. Hawaii, a honeymoon suite, another man. It was like a bad dream, a twisted joke. My mind struggled to reconcile the two realities. Sarah in New York, Sarah in Hawaii. They couldn't both be true. I tried to grasp at any explanation, any reason why Malik might be mistaken. Maybe it was someone who looked like her, a doppelganger, a cruel coincidence. But Malik had said she waved back. She recognized him. The room seemed to tilt. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. The numbers on the spreadsheet swam before my eyes, meaningless symbols on a screen. I felt a wave of nausea, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I asked again, needing to hear it, needing to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Are you absolutely sure it's her? Malik's voice was firm, unwavering. Positive. I'm looking right at her. She's with him. They're together. Together. The word echoed in my mind, a dark, heavy sound. What did that mean? What did it really mean? My imagination filled in the blanks, creating images I didn't want to see, images that made my stomach churn. I tried to focus, to think logically. There had to be a reason, a misunderstanding. Maybe she'd had a layover in Hawaii. Maybe she'd decided to extend her trip without telling me. But the honeymoon suite, that didn't fit. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat that threatened to drown out everything else. I felt a tightness in my throat, a lump of disbelief and betrayal that made it hard to swallow. I wanted to scream, to yell, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of it all. This couldn't be happening. Not to us, not to Sarah. We were happy. We were a team. We had plans, dreams, a future together. This kind of thing happened to other people, not to us. But Malik was still talking, his voice, a steady stream of information I didn't want to hear. Details about the man, about their behavior, about the way they looked at each other. Each word was a nail in the coffin of my disbelief, forcing me to confront a reality I wasn't prepared for. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in was suddenly shifting, unstable. My world was tilting, and I didn't know how to stop it. The initial shock began to give way to a cold, sickening feeling. It wasn't a nightmare, it wasn't a mistake, it was real. Sarah was in Hawaii with another man, and she was using my money to pay for it. The details Malik provided played on repeat in my mind. Her sundress, the honeymoon suite, the way she waved. Each piece of information was a shard of glass, cutting deeper into my gut. I thought about our wedding day, her vows, the promise of forever. It felt like a cruel joke now, a twisted mockery of the commitment we had made. The words, once filled with love and hope, now echoed with deceit. I remembered the way she used to look at me, with admiration, with passion. Where had that gone? When had it faded? Had I been so blind, so trusting that I hadn't noticed the change? A wave of nausea washed over me. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images that flooded my mind. Sarah laughing, smiling with him, their hands intertwined, their lips touching. The thought was unbearable. I felt a tightness in my chest, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. It was more than hurt. It was a deep, visceral betrayal, a violation of everything I held sacred. It was like someone had reached inside me and ripped out a part of myself. I thought about the sacrifices I had made for her, the late nights at the office, the weekends spent supporting her dreams, the countless times I had put her needs before my own. And this was how she repaid me, with lies and infidelity. Anger began to simmer beneath the surface of the hurt. It was a cold, hard anger, different from anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't a passionate rage, but a quiet, simmering fury that burned with a steady, unwavering intensity. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to confront her, but a part of me knew that would be a mistake. That would be playing into her hands. That would give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Instead, a different kind of resolve began to form within me, a determination to not let her get away with this, to not be the victim, to not be the fool. The pain was still there, a dull ache that throbbed with every beat of my heart. But it was no longer the only emotion. It was now intertwined with a growing sense of purpose, a cold, calculated focus. I was going to find out the truth, I was going to gather the evidence, and I was going to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. This wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about justice. It was about reclaiming what she had stolen. The phone call ended, but the questions didn't. They multiplied, swarming in my mind like angry bees. I needed answers, I needed proof. I couldn't rely solely on Malik's word, not entirely. Even though I trusted him, I had to see it for myself. My fingers flew across the keyboard, opening our online banking account. The transaction history stared back at me, a digital trail of betrayal. The charges were there, glaringly obvious. A honeymoon suite at a luxury resort, expensive dinners, spa treatments, all in Hawaii, all on my card. Each entry was a punch to the gut, a confirmation of the unthinkable. Ocean view room, $850. Champagne brunch, $170. Luxury couples massage, $265. Catamaran sunset cruise, $320. The amounts added up, a staggering total of stolen joy, paid for with my money. I felt a coldness spreading through me, a chilling realization of the extent of her deception. This wasn't a brief fling. This was a planned trip, a calculated betrayal, funded with our shared resources. I tried to recall the past few weeks, the subtle changes in her behavior, the late nights at work, the canceled date nights, the vague excuses. I had chalked it up to stress, to the pressures of her job. I had given her space, believing she needed it. Now, those moments took on a sinister new meaning. The distance wasn't work-related. The excuses weren't genuine. She was already planning this, already lying to my face. I pulled up our shared calendar. The dates of her business trip coincided perfectly with the charges in Hawaii. The itinerary she had sent me, the client meetings she had described, were all a fabrication, a carefully constructed lie to cover her tracks. I remembered the last time we had been intimate, the way she had pulled away slightly, the lack of passion in her kiss. I had dismissed it as tiredness, as the usual wear and tear of a long relationship. Now, I wondered if she had already been with him, if she had been comparing me to him, if she had been pretending. The thought made my stomach churn. I felt a wave of disgust, not just at her actions, but at myself for being so naive, so trusting. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? I spent the next few hours meticulously gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Emails, text messages, credit card statements, calendar entries. I pieced together the timeline of her deception, the intricate web of lies she had spun. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a sudden impulse. This was a deliberate act of betrayal, a carefully orchestrated plan to deceive me and take what was mine. And with each new discovery, the anger within me grew, solidifying my resolve to not let her get away with it. The initial haze of disbelief began to clear, replaced by a sharp, cold clarity. The raw pain was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. I wasn't going to break down, I wasn't going to beg, I was going to act. The images of Sarah and the other man, once searing and unbearable, now served a different purpose. They fueled a growing determination, a quiet, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about a violation of trust, a betrayal of everything I held sacred. I started to think strategically, to analyze the situation with a detached, almost clinical precision. I needed a plan, a course of action that would not only expose her deception, but also protect my interests. I wouldn't let her dictate the terms of this fallout. The idea of a dramatic confrontation, a screaming match in a hotel lobby, flashed through my mind. It was tempting, a primal urge to lash out, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted. But I quickly dismissed it. It was too predictable. It was what she would expect. I wanted something more, something precise, something that would dismantle her carefully constructed world, piece by piece. I wanted her to realize the full weight of her actions, the consequences of her betrayal. My mind began to race, piecing together the information I had gathered. The credit card statements, the calendar entries, the vague excuses. It was a puzzle, and I was determined to solve it, to use the pieces to create a picture that would leave no room for doubt. I considered the legal implications. Divorce, of course, but that felt too simple, too easy. I wanted more than just a separation. I wanted to hold her accountable for the financial damage she had caused, for the emotional distress she had inflicted. I started to outline my options, weighing the pros and cons of each. Should I confront her directly? Should I involve lawyers? Should I wait until she returned home? The questions swirled in my mind, but a sense of purpose began to emerge from the chaos. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It wasn't about inflicting pain for the sake of it. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming control. It was about showing her that her actions had consequences, that she couldn't betray me without facing the repercussions. The anger within me shifted, becoming less of a fiery rage and more of a cold, hard determination. I was going to expose her deception, not with loud accusations, but with undeniable facts. I was going to dismantle her lies, not with emotional outbursts, but with meticulous planning and calculated precision. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The outline of a plan began to take shape, a strategy that would not only reveal the truth, but also ensure that she understood the full extent of her betrayal. The plan began to solidify, but I couldn't execute it alone. I needed assistance, someone I could trust, someone with specific skills. My thoughts turned to Joan. We hadn't spoken in years, not since college. She was a force of nature back then, capable of anything. I remembered her hacking into the vending machine to get free snacks for a week. Now she was a cybersecurity consultant, a professional who knew how to navigate the digital world. I found her number online, a relic from our shared past. The phone rang, each tone echoing the years that had passed between us. When she answered, her voice was the same, sharp, efficient, and utterly unfazed. I explained the situation, the bare bones of the betrayal, the intricate web of lies Sarah had spun. I didn't go into the emotional details, the pain and the hurt. I focused on the facts, the hard evidence I had gathered, the financial transactions, the timeline of deception. There was a brief silence on the other end, a moment of consideration. Then she spoke, her tone professional, almost clinical. "I can send you a tracker," she said, "that links to a live purchase log. Give me access to the joint account, and I'll feed everything into a private sheet." It was exactly what I needed. A digital trail, a real-time record of every transaction, every expenditure. It would provide the undeniable proof I needed, the kind of evidence that couldn't be disputed or denied. "Can you match it to GPS locations?" I asked, pushing further, needing every possible detail. She laughed, a short, dry sound. "You want time, place, and context? You got it. I'll have it by tonight." Her confidence was reassuring, a stark contrast to the swirling uncertainty that had consumed me just hours before. She understood the gravity of the situation, the need for precision and accuracy. "Thanks, Joan," I said, a genuine sense of gratitude washing over me. "I'll make it worth your time." "You already have," she replied, her voice tinged with a hint of amusement. "I love a good revenge story." The call ended, but the connection remained. I had an ally, someone on my side, someone who could provide the technical expertise I lacked. It was a step forward, a crucial piece of the puzzle falling into place. I also reached out to Tony, a lawyer recommended by Malik. He was a civil attorney, known for his sharp mind and his ability to dismantle complex cases with meticulous detail. I needed someone who could navigate the legal landscape, who could protect my interests and ensure that Sarah faced the consequences of her actions. I sent him the evidence I had compiled, the digital trail of betrayal, the financial records, the timeline of lies. He reviewed it quickly, his response concise and to the point. "You've got solid grounds," he said during our first call. "Financial misconduct, fraudulent use of joint funds, emotional distress. More importantly, we can file here, but if you want to hit harder, we wait until she's mid-trip. Let her think everything's perfect, then drop the hammer." It was a strategic approach, a way to maximize the impact of the revelation, to let her revel in her deception before pulling the rug out from under her. "Make it happen," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "Just be aware," he cautioned. "This could go public." "I don't care," I replied, the words echoing the cold resolve that had settled within me. With Joan and Tony on board, the plan began to take shape, solidifying into a concrete course of action. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a team, a network of support, ready to help me expose the truth and hold Sarah accountable. The days that followed were a strange mixture of calm and chaos. Outwardly, life continued. I went to work, attended meetings, and went through the motions of my daily routine. But inwardly, everything was different. A tension hummed beneath the surface, a constant awareness of the ticking clock, the impending revelation. Joan's updates arrived regularly, a steady stream of information that painted a detailed picture of Sarah's activities. The spreadsheet grew, a digital tapestry of her deception. Dinners at expensive restaurants, jewelry purchases, a private snorkeling tour. Each entry was time-stamped, geotagged, meticulously documented. One entry in particular stood out, Lover's Cove Picnic Basket Premium. The words stung, a sharp reminder of a shared experience, a romantic gesture now twisted and repurposed for someone else. We had done that picnic 2 years ago, a spontaneous outing on a secluded beach. It had been her idea then, a moment of genuine connection, now tainted by her betrayal. I kept the information to myself, sharing it only with Joan and Tony. Malik provided updates from Hawaii, his observations discreet but detailed. He described Sarah and the other man, their interactions, their behavior. The picture that emerged was one of carefree enjoyment, a vacation from reality, a world built on lies. The waiting was the hardest part, the anticipation, the knowledge of what was happening, the powerlessness to intervene directly. I felt like a spectator watching a play unfold, knowing the ending but unable to influence the plot. I imagined Sarah, oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. She was probably basking in the sun, sipping cocktails, laughing with him. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to crumble, that her secrets were being exposed, that her actions had consequences. The contrast between her unawareness and my knowledge was a strange kind of power, It was a silent control, a strategic advantage. She was walking deeper into the trap, believing she was safe, believing she was in control. I spent the evenings reviewing the evidence, organizing the digital files, and preparing the legal documents. I wanted everything to be perfect, airtight, beyond reproach. There would be no room for excuses, no room for denial. The days stretched into a week, each one bringing me closer to the moment of truth. The tension grew, a tightening coil that threatened to snap. I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, anticipation, a grim satisfaction. I wasn't driven by a desire for revenge, not entirely. It was more about justice, about holding her accountable. It was about reclaiming the control she had stolen, about showing her that her actions had consequences. The waiting was a test of patience, a trial by fire. But with each passing day, my resolve grew stronger, my determination more unwavering. I was ready. I was prepared. The time for silence was coming to an end. The waiting ended. The time for subtle maneuvers had arrived. It was time to introduce the first crack in her carefully constructed facade, to let her know that her secret was no longer safe. A message was crafted, simple and direct. It wasn't accusatory, not yet. It was a single line, written on a plain piece of paper, sealed in an envelope. It was a quiet warning, a chilling hint of the truth. The envelope was delivered not anonymously, but personally. Malik, acting on my instructions, handed it to her in the hotel lobby. He was instructed to say it was from a private guest, nothing more. A cryptic message, a seed of doubt planted in her mind. Her reaction was observed, relayed back to me in fragments. Confusion, a flicker of unease, a forced smile. She took the envelope without question, her composure masking the growing turmoil beneath the surface. The hours that followed were filled with a tense silence. The phone remained quiet. No frantic calls, no desperate pleas. She was processing, trying to decipher the message, trying to understand the source of the threat. The first move was subtle, a gentle nudge, but it was enough. It was a signal that the game had changed, that the rules she thought she was playing by no longer applied. She was no longer operating in the shadows, unseen and untouchable. The carefully constructed illusion began to fray. The perfect vacation, the carefree facade, started to crumble, revealing the cracks beneath. The weight of her deception began to press down, the knowledge that she was no longer in control. The message was a pebble thrown into a still pond, creating ripples that spread outwards, disturbing the calm surface. It was a whisper of truth in a world of lies, a hint of the storm that was about to break. Her initial reaction was a mixture of confusion and denial. She tried to maintain her composure, to brush it off, to pretend that everything was fine, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, feeding on her fear and uncertainty. The carefully planned encounter, the seemingly innocuous envelope, was a strategic move. It was designed to unsettle her, to make her question the security of her deception. It was a way to disrupt her confidence, to remind her that her actions had consequences. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of the truth. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that conveyed more than any accusation or confrontation could have. She knew on some level that something was wrong, that her secret was no longer completely hidden, but she didn't yet know the extent of my knowledge, the depth of my investigation, the careful plan that was unfolding around her. The first move was a calculated risk, a way to test the waters, to gauge her reaction. It was a way to let her know that she had been seen, that her deception had been uncovered, and it was just the beginning. The carefully delivered message served its purpose. It shattered the illusion of a perfect escape, replacing it with a growing unease. The carefully constructed facade began to crumble, revealing the cracks beneath. The phone calls started unanswered, desperate attempts to reach out, to explain, to control the narrative. The silence on the other end was deafening, a stark contrast to the carefree laughter and whispered conversations that had filled the days before. The carefully planned vacation transformed into a desperate scramble, a frantic attempt to salvage the situation, to explain away the undeniable evidence. But the explanations fell flat, hollow echoes in the face of the mounting truth. Legal documents arrived, delivered with cold efficiency. A divorce petition outlining the financial misconduct, the fraudulent use of joint funds. The legal machinery began to grind, a relentless force set in motion by the carefully gathered evidence. The reality of the situation crashed down, a tidal wave of consequences. The carefree days in paradise were replaced by the stark reality of lawyers, courtrooms, and the public exposure of a betrayal. The carefully constructed lies unraveled thread by thread. The fabricated stories, the vague excuses, the carefully curated image, all exposed for what they were, a web of deceit, a betrayal of trust. The other man, once a symbol of escape and excitement, became a reminder of the deception. The shared laughter, the romantic gestures, the stolen moments, all tainted by the knowledge of the lies they were built upon. The carefully planned getaway transformed into a nightmare. The luxurious hotel suite became a prison, the beautiful beaches a backdrop for the unfolding drama. The idyllic setting, once a symbol of freedom, now served as a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal. The carefully constructed world began to fall apart, piece by piece. The financial resources, the social connections, the reputation, all threatened by the exposure of the truth. The attempts to control the damage, to minimize the fallout, proved futile. The evidence was overwhelming, the facts undeniable. The carefully crafted narrative crumbled under the weight of the truth. The future, once a shared vision, became uncertain, a landscape of legal battles, financial settlements, and the emotional wreckage of a broken trust. The carefully laid plans were replaced by the harsh reality of dealing with the aftermath of a betrayal. The carefully hidden secret was now public knowledge, a stain on a reputation, a permanent mark on a life. The carefully constructed lies had consequences, and those consequences were now unfolding, inescapable and undeniable.